Hello and welcome to the Freemasons podcast, Big and Tall Edition.
Yeah.
With your host, Worshipful Brother Joe.
And Worshipful Brother Ken.
Right, Worshipful Brother George is not with us today because the little guy took the day off because his birthday is tomorrow.
Oh, that's cute.
So, yeah. He's still trying to get outside the 3T clothes, but I think he's going to be 39. So happy birthday. Happy early birthday, George.
Happy birthday,
when
brother.
When you're listening back on this tomorrow, you'll get all pissed off.
Yeah.
Which is what we do.
As usual.
All right, Worshipful Brother Ken, why don't you take us to the reviews and likes?
Yep. So let's start with reviews. Why not? We did just get a new 5-star review from, I forget what network this is. I don't think it's Apple. This is from Mr. Dardis. He titled it Entertaining and Informative.
Oh.
Good source of info, opinions, and slice of life for Masons, and anyone considering joining or just looking to find out what Freemasonry is about. Respect the puppet. Obey the puppet.
You must respect and obey the puppet.
So solid advice and a great review. Thank you, brother.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
And then we have a few new Instagram likes, not a ton. M. Shabir, Joseph, Big Joe Van Hove, Dylan Crochet, Michael Leahy, and Emmanuel Pizzoa. So thank you, friends and brothers.
Yes, thank you all. We'll go ahead as the usual and lead us. I'll lead us in a toast.
Yes, we are charged and aligned for the first toast of obligation.
Yes, with our Wyoming whiskey that was sent to us from a listener. So again, once again, thank you for that. Brother, right hand to arms.
To arms.
Ready.
Ready.
Aim.
Aim.
Fire, good fire, fire all. Together, brother.
Vivat, vivat, vivat.
That's nice. That's really nice.
It's quite smooth. And this is small batch, I think, too. It's batch number 70. Like it's written on there. That's cool.
Very, very nice. All right, so we'll get into it. Today's topic is how to join Freemasonry. And on a prior podcast, we talked about what you could expect when getting to the investigating committee and kind of what the first steps are there. But we're going to kind of back it up a little bit because we're seeing a lot of our listeners sending us messages saying, hey, I'm about to send in my petition, or I'm meeting with my committee. But we're seeing a lot of our listeners using our platform as a jumping off point to join the fraternity. So we figured we'd talk a little bit about how to find the proper lodge, how to go about getting a petition, what you can expect prior to actually getting one, and really help you, assist you with knocking on that door. Worshipful Brother Ken, you want to kick us off with your thoughts and advice on that?
Sure. So I guess at the very, very beginning of the process, we should probably talk prerequisites, right? So it's going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There's some things that are just universal requirements of Masonry. But, we can obviously speak from our jurisdiction, which is pretty similar to others in the United States and fairly similar to others internationally as well. But Masonry requires that you have a belief in a higher power, first and foremost. So we don't care who that higher power is. Could be God, could be Buddha. Could be whatever.
Could be Christian, Jewish, like you said, could be Muslim, could be Buddhist, could be just about anything out there.
Yeah, and even if traditionally your religion is kind of, or the organized body of your religion has been kind of against Freemasonry, we would still allow you to become a Freemason. I mean, that's a personal decision that you have to make as to whether you want to get yourself into that kind of situation with your religious organization, but Freemasonry would welcome you with open arms. So got to believe in a higher power. Can't be an atheist. The promises that we make when we become Masons are made in the name of whoever that individual is, whoever that deity is that you believe in. So that's why it's a requirement. In most jurisdictions, you have to be a man of lawful age, and the number is going to vary. Yep. From jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Here in the state of Connecticut, I believe is it 18 still?
18 still.
Yep. So you have to be 18 to be a Mason here in the state of Connecticut. I know there are a few that require you to be 21 in the states, and then internationally, have more of a blind spot. I don't know exactly what all of their requirements are, but generally you have to be, you have to be a man. You can't be a child. Other requirements include, and this is going to vary more between jurisdictions, but you can't be, mentally unable to understand the obligations that you're taking or the teachings of Masonry.
Right.
We try to be inclusive, like we're not anti, mental disability or anything like that. But I mean, you're joining an organization where you have to understand certain things that you're agreeing to,
with some significant obligations and ties that you're swearing before God or your higher power that you're going to uphold these oaths and obligations. So you have to be able to understand what you're agreeing to, which I think is it's a pretty basic requirement. I don't think anybody would fault us for that.
And our court system is kind of based on, well, a lot of parliamentary procedure and here in the States is based on Freemasonry. And, you can't be made guilty of a crime because of certain faculties being impaired.
Exactly.
So it's no real, there's no difference between that and that particular requirement for Freemasonry.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not that we look down upon anybody with a mental disability or anything. It's more that we want to make sure that they understand and want them to be a productive member of the fraternity. So
Yep. We take good men and we make them better. I'm sure that's kind of the standard marketing line that everybody's heard about Freemasonry, but we take that very seriously. You do have to be a good man to be made a Mason to begin with. How that is interpreted is going to, again, vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Here in Connecticut, and I'm sure it's pretty consistent with the other jurisdictions around the world, you can't be guilty of a felony, usually.
Yep.
There is some leeway there. It's still something that we'll talk with a potential petitioner about. But in general, if you're guilty of a felony, especially if it's an egregious one, we're not going to take you as a Mason.
Right. But if it was, I know there was one that we debated. I think it was hypothetical, but I'm sure it's happened in real life somewhere. Let's say you did something stupid when you were 18, 19 years old. Now you're 35, family man, own a home, have kids, nothing in your record since then. That may be something that, is at least worth discussing and exploring more.
Yep.
Especially if it were something, a non-violent offense. But, yeah, it's more times than not it'll preclude you, but there may be instances where if you've made amends and have made up for it since then for something you did when you were really young, you may be able to work around that.
And some of us have done some stupid things when we were younger and just didn't get caught, right? So, it's a little bit of a gray area, but generally if you were guilty of a violent crime, especially if it was recent.
I know a guy who's still does stupid things and he's old.
Yeah, I know. Occasionally guilty of that myself. Just not found guilty by a court of law, but
exactly.
So yeah, I mean, there's also, as far as background checks, it's not always required. Here in the state of Connecticut, there's no Grand Lodge guidance or requirement anyway on conducting background checks on potential petitioners.
Currently, there's not, but I think it's coming up at our next our semi-annual in a couple months. It's going to be voted on, and I can't imagine it's not going to go through. Just based on just talking to people and people being on board with it. But there may be some jurisdictions where it's already required.
It definitely is, because I think that's where that recommendation came from that they've been talking about in Grand Lodge. So, it's not, sometimes it's an informal kind of investigation of somebody's background. Sometimes it's a formal one. They use a, particular service to do that, and it's, mandated by your grand jurisdiction in the state or the country where you hail. That can vary. I wouldn't say that it's, I would never say, hey, don't go talk to a Mason about becoming a Mason just because you have something in your past. You did something stupid when you were a teenager, but know that it's going to be, there would be a conversation around that for sure.
Yeah, and I know the way that Connecticut is, at least the proposal that's being made, if it passes, is that we don't run the background check, or the lodge doesn't run the background check. The person that's applying, the petitioner, contacted an approved third-party vendor that we've contracted with, gets the background check run. It gets sent to the petitioner, and then they get to decide whether or not they want to attach it to the petition and go forward. They have the option of saying, you know what, I don't want to get into that. I'm gonna step away. So if there's something there that they don't want disclosed or they don't want to have a discussion about, they can then opt out of the application or the petitioning process at that time. That's the proposal as it stands in Connecticut.
I think that's a good way of doing it because we're not in the business of embarrassing people. We just have certain requirements that we have to fulfill or that we require of our petitioners. So we're just trying to do that in the most inclusive and non-offensive way possible. So we already talked about belief in God. It's a fundamental tenet of Freemasonry. Being a man of lawful age. Here in the state of Connecticut, under our grand jurisdiction, we don't take women. We don't take, boys. You got to be a man.
Another requirement in Connecticut that I'm assuming there's probably something similar, but there's a 6-month residency requirement on that you have to be not at necessarily the same residence, but they want to know that you've lived in Connecticut for the last 6 months. So that's probably something that may vary slightly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it is a requirement in Connecticut.
Yep. I'm sure in military lodges they don't.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not like a requirement of Freemasonry. It's not a landmark of Freemasonry.
Correct.
That's just kind of a requirement that you'll see in some grand jurisdictions.
Couple quick comments here. Brother Daniel Valdez, background check was done when I petitioned in California. So they have that there. But however, Joe Schultz says they don't have it currently in Delaware. Luminous Night. Hey, brothers, great show. We've had a few candidates that have DWIs on their record. As long as the incident was an isolated one and they resolved the matter responsibly, it has not been an issue. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably how it would be handled in most jurisdictions. He goes on to say part of being a better man is owning your past mistakes and articulating the life lesson in order to help teach others. If you can do that, your past shouldn't hinder you. Yeah. And I would actually say that, if the goal of Freemasonry is to take good men and make them better, that one bad thing doesn't necessarily make you a bad man, and two, as you're making other good men better as a member of the fraternity, it might help having somebody that's made some mistakes that can pass on those life lessons. Yep. And also I would probably imagine they would take if they were in a position to be a junior warden and in charge of the craft at refreshment, they may have a different light on it and maybe be a little stricter on it. So, Good comments, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I know brothers that are very active Masons that, had some stuff happen in their past, and those conversations were had, and, it was obvious from their side of that conversation that they had learned from those mistakes, and, so it's possible. I'm not going to say that happens everywhere. I mean, obviously things vary. In Freemasonry, we don't have any kind of central body that dictates all of the requirements of becoming a Mason, but it's definitely worth telling your story if you're comfortable doing that. And lastly, I don't think I forgot any, but you have to be well recommended. And well recommended here in our jurisdiction means you have to be vouched for by a Mason. You have to be recommended by one and vouched for by one. So there has to be 2 separate signatures on your petition. Both of them have to be Masons. One of them, I think in Connecticut, one of them has to be from your lodge or the lodge that you're petitioning.
Yes, I believe so.
I don't remember which one it is, recommender or a voucher, but I think that's, having 2 people that are Masons already recommend you, I think is a pretty consistent requirement, at least in the grand jurisdictions in the U.S.
And that's where we usually get a lot of our questions from. It's like, hey, I want to be a Mason, but I don't know anybody that's one. So they, whether they came across our podcast or they saw something on the History Channel or saw a movie or whatever, hey, I want to do this. But if I have to have 2 people vouch for me or one recommend and one vouch for me, and I don't know any, that's a little bit of a problem. And I bet you there's a lot of people that probably stop right there and say, you know what, if I don't know anybody, I can't go forward. And
yeah, it's awkward. I don't want to go and approach somebody who's a Mason that I've never talked to before.
Exactly. So I think, one of the things that we'll talk about is, okay, so let's say you're in that situation where you don't have somebody that you know that's a Freemason, and you just don't know where to start. The first thing that I would recommend is find out where your local lodges are. And that's usually easily done through a Google search or some kind of online search. But we had a little bit of a conversation before we started recording.
Yep.
It's like, well, how would they know whether it was a regular Masonic lodge or if it was a irregular or clandestine lodge that could potentially make their journey even longer, or in some instances halt their journey. So, one of the things that we'll offer is, every lodge in Connecticut the secretary has a book that's published every year. It's edited every year, where it'll list all of the recognized lodges in not only our country but in other countries as well. So if that's something we can certainly help you out with, if you don't know where to turn and you can't find, you're not sure if a lodge or the Grand Lodge is recognized in your state, and you don't know where to go, drop us a quick message. We can easily look that up for you. I'd be more than happy to help get you on the right track. The other piece of that I would say as well is find 2 or 3 lodges that are close to you. Every lodge has its own makeup, has its own chemistry, has its own vibe, feel to it. And it's important to make sure that you find a lodge where you mesh with the members. And we're a pretty diverse group, and every lodge has a fairly diverse background and a bunch of different folks, but you just get different vibes from different places. There might be a traditional observance lodge where everything is really strict, really hardcore. Maybe you like that. Maybe that's not something that's really your cup of tea. You're looking for something a little more, laxed. I won't say blue collar, but something
like a rural lodge or something.
Yeah.
Where you're allowed to be a little bit less formal.
Yeah, I know a lot of lodges where they're not in tuxes and suits all the time, because a lot of people are coming right after work. They might be like in a factory town, or there might be a farming community where you show up in overalls and boots and pop your apron on. So it's always good to get a feel for the vibe of the lodge and whether or not you fit. And as you're traveling and as you're attending these, the dinners, at least I could speak to any lodge in Connecticut, dinner is about an hour before lodge starts. And it's open. So if you're interested and a lodge meets on a certain night, get there, contact them first, let them know you're interested in coming. Go sit and have dinner with the guys. Get a good idea what's going on. You won't be able to stay for the meeting. But hang out with the guys, have some food, get a good feel for it. Do that a few times, and you'll probably end up coming out of it with a recommender and a voucher.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't know any Masons, you're going to have to meet some. That's the best way to do it. And it's actually, dinners at Masonic meetings are great experiences, even if, especially if you mesh with the guys in the lodge. But it tends to be, I don't want to say it's jovial, but, we're a bunch of friends, really, really good friends and brothers getting together and breaking bread. I mean, you tend to have a good time. So I think that's a good way to get an overall feel for that particular lodge. It's a great way to do it. And
you'll get a good idea just from walking in, if the lodge officers understand their roles. If you come in and you're sitting in the corner by yourself and nobody comes up and sits with you, might not be the warmest and friendliest of lodges, or they might just not know their role there. I could tell you that I've always, whenever I've seen somebody singing alone, whether it's a brother or a guest, I've always gone out of my way to sit with them and just talk to them, pick their brain a little bit, and see why they're there, what they're interested in. It's actually the job of the senior deacon to welcome and accommodate guests and visiting brethren. So your senior deacon should be all over that, and hopefully one of the more experienced Masons or senior officers of the lodge, if they see somebody coming in, they'll have a conversation with the senior deacon and say, hey, this is your guy. You're going to be with him during dinner and see what's going on.
And hey, we're normal people, right? Like, we have
For the most
personalities too. Some of us are a little bit more extroverted. Some of us are a little bit more introverted. And the introverts in the lodge may not, be super comfortable going and saying hello to a new person. But there's going to be the other variety as well, right? There are going to be brothers
plenty
there,
of the other ones,
past masters that are very, outspoken about masonry and love the craft, that have a lot of stories, for example. They're going to go over and talk to that brother. So if you're, sitting there by yourself, then something may be wrong. I don't see that as being likely, but
it's unlikely. Yeah. I would think, and 'cause quite honestly, whether you're an officer, non-officer, generally speaking, we like getting new people in. We want to get new people into the craft. It's exciting when we see a fresh face we haven't seen before, whether it's a brother visiting from another lodge, because that's exciting, or if it's somebody who's interested. It's usually what I've seen, and I can speak for this in the two lodges I belong to, usually we overwhelm the poor person.
Yeah.
Like, next thing you know, he's surrounded by 5-6 people. Yeah. Hey, what's going on? What are you doing? And he gets the same questions like 5-6 times. And he's probably thinking, oh, my God. Like, well, what's going on?
Yeah. And that prospective brother might be an introvert, or prospective petitioner might be an introvert too himself. And he might be like, whoa.
Yeah, it might freak him out. So, but like I said, generally speaking, we're excited when a prospect comes to the door and wants to talk to us about masonry, because we like talking about it for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, most active masons that you're going to see in a lodge are active because they love the craft, and they'll talk your ear off about all the stories of famous masons and masons during World War II and so forth. So yeah, generally you're going to have a good conversation at one of those dinners.
So here's a couple comments I want to hit on. One is actually very interesting from Joe Schultz, but first we'll go to Joseph Van Hove. In Illinois, we were asked to list anything that would be on record. On the petition, they would want to list that. Joe Schultz, if not, we have to know you. If you don't know them already, they have to know you for a year in Delaware before you can put on a petition.
Oh, before they can sign?
Yep.
And vouch for you, okay.
Yep. And then they ask them to come out to public events if they don't know anyone.
Yep.
But yeah, so a year in Delaware. That's interesting. Daniel Valdez, that was me. I didn't know any Masons, and I was so nervous when I approached the Masonic Lodge and knocked on the door. Brother inside was friendly and told me about Masonry and gave some info.
Yeah, and that's a good lesson to all Masons out there. I mean, you're somebody's first impression of Masonry.
Yeah.
So if that ever happens to you, dig deep if you happen to be an introvert and you don't like meeting new people, and make sure that you accommodate that person, because they're going to remember that.
And, if you are that introvert that doesn't like to do it, that's, when we talk about taking good men and making them better, sometimes it's certain social skills like that then we can give you. Or if you hate public speaking, you're going to have to memorize some things and present it in front of the lodge at some point. Those are all things that will help you in your stations in life. I could tell you, I never loved public speaking. I wasn't terrified of it, but it was like uncomfortable. But now it's like at work I sometimes do the training sessions for like 150 people all over New England, because they know I'm comfortable getting in front of a group, and it's just a natural thing now. So that's definitely given me some opportunities in my vocation to take on some tasks that other people just aren't comfortable with. So.
Yeah, likewise. I always got butterflies when I had to do public speaking for more than, say, a crowd of 10, 15 people. After I became a Mason and I wasn't comfortable doing ritual either, but I pushed myself to do it because I was really impressed with some of the brothers that performed the degrees for me. And after doing that and, working really hard at it and, getting to a point where I feel I'm doing fairly well at it, I would then go and do some presentations or something at work, and I would notice that it didn't bother me as much. So
yeah, it doesn't. You don't even think about it.
Practical stuff that you can get from Masonry. It's powerful.
So another way that you can join and meet some Masons is some jurisdictions. I know in Connecticut, it's usually, we didn't do it last year, obviously, and I don't know if there's any plans for this year, but usually every October, we do a statewide open house. I know Massachusetts has done that. I've actually heard somebody is Ben Franklin, I think, on the radio.
That's pretty cool.
doing the radio commercials, just announcing the open house. But you might see just simple events like public picnics or an information night, or we had both here at Morningstar and at Ashlar Aspetuck. We had when we had the Liberty Ghost Hunters come in, and they were presenting the evidence. We opened that up to the public. Anybody could buy a ticket, and it was a good way to just get somebody to come in and ask some questions outside of the paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
So look for those types of things.
And you'll find those events on Facebook. You'll find them on the lodge website. So once you've identified that lodge and you feel like you kind of gel with those guys, maybe you went to dinner once, hit their website, hit their Facebook page. They'll like that, because if they see that you immediately went and liked their page, they'll be like, okay, well, maybe this guy's serious.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to find those semi-public events that you can attend and maybe bring your family to, because it's important that they get exposed to Masonry too. If you're thinking about joining the craft, they may have some, your wife or your children or your significant other may have some reservations. They may not be as like-minded as you, and it's a good opportunity to kind of have them see what the good works of Masonry are. Maybe a charity event that we're doing at the local lodge or something.
And the one thing that I will say is, I've heard this said so many times, and it really, I'm not saying it's a lie. It may be an over-exaggeration of the situation, but one of the things you'll hear is, oh, it's only one night a month. That's all. It's just one night a month. Or some lodges meet twice a month, but my mother lodge meets once a month. It's only once a month. You only have to show up once a month. It's more than once a month. It's probably plan on 2 or 3. Might not be weeknights, but probably one meeting per month, and then something on a weekend during that month.
Yeah, and if you want to be active, if you like these guys, if you become friends with them, and you start going to those events, you can start filling up your calendar pretty quick. But of course, there's no obligation.
Right.
To
it's
show up
still
to
a
that,
volunteer organization.
Absolutely.
But what'll happen is, hey, where's that new guy? How come he doesn't come around?
Yeah.
He doesn't like us, or.
And you'll have brothers start ringing your phone and asking if you're okay and so forth. It's another thing we're famous for. Joe Schultz, we're all different. We aren't all wired the same. No offense, Ken. Good point.
Good point.
And he learned public speaking in lodge.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think that's just, and I see Freemasonry changing a little bit in the new world that we live in, just with a generational thing. A lot of kids growing up today don't know how to have simple things like a telephone conversation. They're afraid to call somebody on the phone.
Or like etiquette on the telephone.
A lot of people, I know a lot of, high school age kids that don't know how to shake a hand, because they've never really had to do it. And especially now with COVID, they probably certainly haven't learned that over. They might know an elbow bump more.
Good
but
point.
I think there's certain things that Freemasonry can give to this new generation that are more like how to be a gentleman. There's some etiquette. There's some specific Masonic etiquette. But when you want to be a pillar of society and you want to stand out as the example of somebody, and they're like, oh, wow, that guy's a Mason? Oh, wow, he's like a really nice guy, and I've spoken to him, and I've seen him. And, there's certain social things that the craft can help you with, as us old codgers.
Yeah. I don't know if they
help.
teach in school that, what a handshake deal is.
No.
That if you make a deal, or not a bet necessarily. If you're making a deal with another human being, and you shake their hand, that's a deal. Like, to a Mason, that's still binding. That's a binding contract. So So there's certain aspects of that I think just society is moved past because of technology or other things that we can still help out with. Yeah, the world could deal with more of that for sure. So like Worshipful Brother Joe said, you can reach out to us on Facebook, any of the social channels really. If you send us a direct message, one of us will get it. And if you have a question, or if you have a couple local lodges that you're looking at, or one in particular, toss it our way, and we'll go through our data banks and books and so forth, and make sure that it's a regular lodge for you, and then you can continue on your journey and go and visit those lodges and see if you meld with the brothers there.
Yeah, like we'd be more than happy to help you. Another thing from Daniel Valdez here, and how to dress in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's probably a lot of, in my opinion, any boy 16 years or older, and obviously a man 18 years or older,
Mm-hmm.
should have a pair of khakis and a navy blue blazer.
Yeah, and know how to tie a tie.
Yeah, you never know.
Yep.
And that's just something where it comes in handy on a lot of things. You may only use it once or twice a year, but those times that you need it, you'll actually be happy that you had it.
Yeah.
And, whether it be other events or, whatnot, there's a lot of help. There's a lot of things that we can certainly help out with. But,
yeah, eventually you might have to go to a wedding. So
yeah.
It's a good thing to learn how to tie a tie if you don't have, a relative or, parents or something like that taught you how to tie a tie. We can at least hook you up with that information for sure. And I know a lot of brothers who know how to tie a bow tie too, which is, that wasn't even taught to me when I was a kid. I learned that in Masonry.
I learned that in Masonry as well. Worshipful Brother Bob First, who's been a tremendous mentor of mine throughout the craft, actually taught me. I still use the clip-on to this day because
it's convenient sometimes.
It's very convenient.
Yeah.
But I was actually, I want to say I might have even been a fellow craft. I don't even know that I was a master Mason at that point, but he and I were outside a funeral home at a Masonic funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And he was I think he was, he must have been an officer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he came in his tux and he was like, "Hey, do you know how to tie a bow tie?" I'm like, "No, I usually just clip it."
Clearly not. The thing's hanging loose around my neck.
Hey, so we're over at his pickup truck. He goes,
"That's cool.
Here, I'll show you." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Where'd you learn that from?" And I may forget the brother that taught him, but I think it was Worshipful Brother Jim Mellon, who was one of the older guys in the lodge who's since passed away, passed that on to him.
Yep.
So there's just that chain of things that get passed down.
Bow tie tying for sure is like one of those traditions that goes between Masons.
Yes.
I've heard those stories in my lodge as well. That's awesome. Very cool.
But what else as far as we covered how to find the lodge, making sure that they're not clandy. We talked about
general
finding
requirements.
Good fit, general requirements.
Yep. And we've talked a lot in the past about what happens after you hand that petition in the process and so forth. So we don't really need to beat that whole horse more. But
if we have anybody that's listening right now that has any questions that maybe they haven't begun their journey, just pop a comment right in there.
Yep.
Or if any of our experienced brothers have had people come to them or have any advice for people listening out there that don't know how to get started, pop it in the comments and we'll go ahead and read it.
Yeah, the nice thing about Masonic lodges, and I'm sure we've talked about this, ad nauseum in the past, but Masons come from all walks of life, right? If you're thinking about petitioning a Masonic lodge or going and investigating Freemasonry and you don't know any Masons, it's important to kind of know that there is no, there's always this stigma in Masonry of being it's an old man's club. You have to be rich. You have to be a pillar of society. You have to be somehow important in order to become a Mason, and that's not true at all.
No, we come from all walks of life.
So, just know that when you visit that lodge, I mean, some lodges are a little bit more homogenous than others, right? If you're in a rural community, most people there are probably going to be involved in agriculture, for example. But, in general, if you're in a city or, suburb or something like that, you're going to find people that do everything for a living. Some people, make almost no money at all. Some people are CEOs of companies or involved in politics or something like that. We come from everywhere. So I think it's important to know that, hey, you don't have to be like a businessman or something like that and already have like a huge wardrobe of fancy clothing, and tuxedos to become a Mason.
That may have been true at some time.
Yeah.
But certainly not now. Joe Schultz adds, be careful what you see on the internet. It can give a false expectation.
Oh,
so that's a really good point is, once you've done your research on lodges and stuff on the internet and you kind of know your path, stop looking. One, like you said, it could set a false expectations. Two, why ruin the surprise?
Yeah.
If you're going to see a movie or read a book that you've been wanting to read or see for a couple years and you're super excited, you wouldn't want to know the ending before you even step into that movie theater or open that book. So
Yeah, no
definitely
spoilers.
stop. About 50% of what you'll read on the internet is true, and the other part, just don't spoil it for yourself. Going through that experience is one of the most wonderful things that you'll experience in your life. The other thing that I'll add, since he brought up internet, and initially this is where I thought he was going, watch your social media accounts. If you have public accounts, be mindful of what you put on there.
Yep.
Because that may make an impression upon the people that are investigating you or that you're talking, and they may not vouch for you based on something that they saw. And we in open lodge, we shy away from talk about religion and politics, but some of that bleeds over, and it's your right to put on your social media whatever you want. But if you're falling into like one of the extreme buckets on either side, and sometimes the language that's used isn't always appropriate, that's something that's going to be taken into consideration.
Yep.
You have the right to say what you want. We have the right to choose who comes into our fraternity and who doesn't.
Yep. And it's that's important even for if you're a new Mason or a Mason that's been a Mason for 20-25 years, something like that. It's just like anything else. If you represent an organization, if you say, hey, I'm a Freemason, or you have a background image or something on your profile that has a square and compasses on it, you now represent the craft. You're now, I'm trying to think of what the term is in social media management, an ambassador. You're an ambassador of the brand of Freemasonry, right? So
yes.
If you are going to do that.
An influencer.
Right. So somebody at some point is going to see that, and that's going to be their first impression of Freemasonry. So if you're not mindful of what you're posting, you're slandering the craft.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. It's something that I put a lot of thought into because I'm proud of my affiliation with Freemasonry. I have a lot of Masons that are friends on Facebook. And I said, hey, I'll be a brand ambassador for Freemasonry because I love the craft that much. But I'm very careful of what I put on Facebook now.
Yeah.
And it's a mind shift. It's hard to do, but
it really is. And anybody that follows, that's friends with me on Facebook or follows my page, there may be a few things that are borderline that I pop up every now and then. But imagine the things that I wanted to post that didn't make it.
That didn't make it.
That didn't make it because I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm friends with not only a lot of Masons that may look at this differently, but I've got I'm friends with some like past Grand Masters of Connecticut and some people that are current Grand Lodge officers. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. So in a way, it kind of keeps you in line, and it's a good reminder of, guard your words and actions. You've got to, subdue your passions, as we like to say, and kind of keep the emotions in check.
Yeah, don't drink too much Wyoming whiskey and then go on social media. We know that lesson well.
But I've actually seen brothers, and this is one of my pet peeves, somebody who's already a Mason, just, again, if you want to put anything on your Facebook page or social media, that's your right. But if you're going to put things that are obnoxious or lewd or whatever, just don't have like a picture of yourself with an apron as your profile picture, or the Freemason, the square and compasses as your background down there. You are representing the craft. And it's like the mirror that we have in my mother lodge. There's a mirror, and it says at the top of it,
I got the same one.
Remember, this is what somebody else's impression of a Freemason is.
Usually my my bow tie is like a skew when I'm looking at it too. I'm like, oh.
But no, you definitely gotta watch that and guard it. But especially if you're looking to join the craft, that's something that you want to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, we're not trying to quash anybody's rights here. It's the same as if you work for a company, right? And let's say you're working for some defense contractor and you post pictures of you, I don't know, at company events and that kind of thing, and then you start putting slanderous stuff up, guess what? You can get fired for that. So the same is kind of true in Masonry. And like you said, I mean, this is a free country. You know, you're free to post whatever kind of, you know, things you want on social media. Just don't let everybody know that you're a member of the craft if you're going to do that.
So, some more comments here. Dan Valdez. When I visited another lodge for the first time, I wore a polo shirt and felt so underdressed. Didn't know the etiquette at that time. And we actually had that conversation with somebody on the podcast page the other day, because he was going for his investigation and didn't know what to wear. General rule: you can never go wrong with the suit.
Right.
Like you really, if you want to make it a little more casual, you could take the tie off, or you could keep the tie on, take the jacket off. You can never go wrong. But this gets back to that point I made where, you know, 16, 18 years old, you go out and buy your first navy blue blazer.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if you ask and somebody's local, they'll probably let you borrow one if you're the same size.
Yep.
But, you know, definitely can't go wrong with a suit, or at the very least a blue blazer.
I agree. And it's, you know, by the same token, if you don't know any better, we're all adults, right? Like, if you walk in and you say, "Oh crap, I'm sorry, you guys are all in tuxedos and suits," like I didn't know, we're not going to have a problem with that. Like,
no, and usually
usually
what happens is the blame like shifts to another brother. And
right.
Like, hey,
how come you didn't freaking tell this guy?
Exactly. Who invited this guy? Now you made this new guy who's coming, and now you make him feel uncomfortable. And usually there's some ribbing that goes on with whoever invited him.
That's 100% accurate.
Let's see. A couple other things quick here. Luminous Knight, he's in the Pacific Northwest and would be happy to talk to anybody about Freemasonry and assist you in finding a properly recognized lodge. Again,
Awesome.
Come to us. We can put you in contact with somebody. We've got a network of people. Joe Schultz, so what happens after you petition a lodge? What can a petitioner expect? You know, Dan Valdez, who just going through the process now, comments, be patient. It can take a while for a lodge to review your petition. Keep going to lodge after you turn in your petition. It'll give brothers more time to get to know you.
Yeah, we're never going to forget about you, especially if you're showing up to events and so forth. And there are sometimes lulls in our schedule because, you know, lodges will go dim in the summer months sometimes because there's no air conditioning, or over the holidays because people, you know, get very busy around that time, and having that break between, you know, mid-December and early January makes sense in a lot of areas. But
yeah, and I know parts of Maine, they go dim in I believe December and January, not only for holidays, but also because it's really freaking cold.
Yeah.
And they get, you know, a bunch of storms. So different jurisdictions will do different things. Usually you could find that out from either their Facebook page or their website. That'll tell you, hey, we meet, you know, second Wednesday of the month except for July and August, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, understand that it may take a few months. There are also some jurisdictions, or it may be more of a local lodge type of thing, but I know there are places that exist where they'll make you ask 3 times before they give you the petition. So don't give up. If it's something you're really interested in, it's something you really want to do, make sure you ask at least 3 times. If you ask 4 times and they still haven't given it to you, then maybe it's time to go to find another lodge.
Look at another lodge.
But that may be just a way that they're gauging how interested you are and how serious you are about it.
We tend to
don't
take
give up.
quality over quantity. Is kind of the watchword in most jurisdictions around the world. We're not looking to bolster our numbers back to what they look like in the post-war era. It's just not feasible.
Happen,
it's probably never going to happen. So we have shifted our focus, if it hasn't been there all along, on quality over quantity. So, you know, just know that your petition does have to be reviewed. An investigating committee has to be set up. They have to the brothers that are on that committee, usually it's three brothers in our jurisdiction. They got to coordinate their schedules and stuff, and then they'll contact you and figure out what makes sense for you to meet with them and do the actual investigation. So,
and then they have to come to lodge and report on the investigation, and then it has to go to a vote. And you know, sometimes, you know, if there's a low turnout, or maybe there's a lot on the business schedule that week, they might postpone the vote to the next meeting. Usually that doesn't happen, but it is possible.
Yep.
And for some reason, if you don't get voted in, I know in Connecticut, again, it could be a jurisdictional thing. In Connecticut, if you don't get past the first vote, you have to wait 6 months before you can repetition.
Yep.
And it could be, I don't know, there could be various reasons why the vote doesn't go a certain way. It could be that, hey, maybe they just don't think you're ready at this time, or
Yep.
maybe they don't think you're a good fit. There are also times where, I don't know, people vote a certain way just to make a point.
Yeah, that happens.
That's
less
rare.
frequently.
Yeah, that's rare, but it does happen. But usually, if you don't make it past the vote, there's usually a call from the secretary or the master and saying,
Yep.
hey, look, didn't go through, but if they want you and they think that you could be a good future fit, they'll probably tell you,
say,
hey,
"Here are
still
your options,"
keep coming
yeah.
around, and
Yep.
and it could simply be because people haven't seen you enough and they don't know you. So
Yep.
just keep coming around for that 6 months. If they encourage you to apply again in 6 months, that means that there's probably a good chance that you'll get in that second time. I don't think anybody is harsh enough or cruel enough to say, hey, yeah, apply again in 6 months so we could vote you down again.
Yeah, no, it's generally not going to happen. And the process is a very rigid one from a procedural standpoint in Freemasonry. We take very seriously the creation of new Masons. It's one of the most important things that we do, right? So we're not so interested in a huge quantity of new petitioners coming in, but when we find one that we do believe is a fit and that's really interested in becoming a member of the lodge, we're not going to squander that opportunity.
Right.
No intelligent lodge of Masons would
No.
ever do that, right? And be like, oh, well, we're just going to vote for,
Just for giggles.
I don't know, like read every line of the receipt for dinner tonight, and that's going to be business, and then we're just going to forget about this poor petitioner. Like,
Right.
it's, we prioritize that activity in Freemasonry.
You could have some lodges that are doing extremely well with membership, and they might have a lag. They might have a waiting list.
A full slate, yeah.
Yeah, because you can only, I'm of the mindset of usually, one, if possible, I like to do 1 degree per candidate. That's not always possible. Usually once you get past 4, the wheels start to come off a little bit. 5 is
Yeah.
difficult.
5 is the max in the state of Connecticut, too,
Yeah.
for any degree. And that's,
That's
just
hard
getting
to do.
that many brothers around the altar is sometimes a
Yeah.
train wreck. So.
And a lot of our lodges are small.
Yeah.
They're not big, and trying
Yeah.
to do some of the things that get done during that degree, sometimes it's a bit challenging, and sometimes you lose a little something.
Yep. But a lodge that you're talking to is going to tell you those things.
Right.
And, they'll let you know, hey, on the worst case scenario is really they're going to say, hey, there's this other lodge
Right.
that either they'll perform the degree for you and you're still a full member of this lodge, or, hey, we just have too much of an influx of membership. These guys over here, don't really have that good kind of problem.
Right.
Why don't you go talk to them and see if, maybe they're a good fit for you. But we'll always find a way to accommodate you. It's just, there are bottlenecks sometimes.
Right. And if I were you, if they said there is a waiting period or they're backlog, I don't know. I would ask why.
Yeah, that's
and they'll tell
valid
you. And if it's
question.
like, hey, it's just we've had an influx of memberships. People really like this lodge and want to join. Maybe it's worth the wait.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It's like when I had my gallbladder out, I was meeting with my surgeon, and that was like the worst pain ever. And I'm excited to get to see the surgeon, and he's like, yeah, okay, we'll schedule out. It's probably going to be about 2.5, 3 weeks before your surgery.
Yeah, no, I don't want to wait that
I'm
long.
like, are you like seriously? I'm in excruciating pain
Yeah.
like multiple times a day. And his response to me was, well, I could probably find you a surgeon that'll take you tomorrow.
But
There's a reason why he's
Yeah.
not busy.
Yeah.
He's not as good as I am.
Right.
I'm like, all right, I think I'll wait.
Yeah, I
here.
think-
You sold me.
Yeah, exactly. That's some good salesmanship from a medical professional.
Well,
Holy
and
crap.
this guy's legit. Like, I think he graduated Cornell Med, is on, like, he did his residency at one of the hospitals associated with Harvard. He's on the board for Harvard and Yale. Like, this guy.
He's
this
a
guy is
gallbladder
legit.
freaking master.
He does that, hernias, and he's actually one of the most renowned breast cancer surgeons in the world.
Oh, right
Does
on.
that Da Vinci robotic stuff, and
Oh,
all
yeah,
that
you got to
fun
be
stuff.
you got to be crazy to be able to operate that stuff.
So yeah,
Nice.
shout out to Dr. Kendler, good
Yeah.
guy. But yeah, so that's
Thank
I
you
just
for
remember
fixing
that.
Joe's gallbladder, Dr. Kendall.
Actually,
really
he removed
appreciate
it.
that.
It's like it's gone.
Or whatever you
But
did. It
but
worked.
no, it was just that reminded me. He's like, yeah, they can get you somebody that could take you tomorrow, but
Yeah.
you might not get the same experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
So,
a good point.
so yeah, ask why. If it's just like, yeah, we just haven't gotten around to it, then all right, then go check out another
Yeah,
lodge.
that
maybe.
tells you something too.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Joe Schultz, pandemic caused a huge backlog, absolutely.
Mhm.
And if you're looking now, like we said, a lot of lodges go dim in July and August, so they just might not be there. They might not be checking the mail as regularly or checking voicemails or whatnot. So
Yep.
be patient, but don't give up. Keep trying.
Yeah.
Be a pain in
and
the butt if it's that important to you.
I think at this point in the pandemic too, a lot of lodges have kind of found the butter zone and know how to operate.
Yeah.
And so I think things are kind of getting back to normal, but you never know. I mean, with all this stuff going on, it could be that they may have to, stop degrees for a little while again. So,
Yeah.
be patient with us, just like everything else.
And then one other thing that I'll mention, we have this in Connecticut, which has kind of helped with the pandemic and other things. You can actually fill out not necessarily a petition online, but you can enter the process online. It's the EMR program, electronic mail request?
Electronic membership
request. There you go. I should know that. But in essence, you go to any other website where you're like, oh, contact us for more information. That's what it is.
Yep.
That can get the process started, which is good because the secretary, or actually usually it's the district representative, kind of piggyback or quarterbacks that, and then we'll farm it out to the lodges.
And they find the correct lodge, too,
Yeah.
which kind of helps in your search so you know you're going to the correct place and not, possibly some clandestine lodge or
Exactly.
one that, fits where you're coming from. They'll find that information for you.
Yeah, so
That's a good point.
There is that electronic or virtual knock on the door, so to
Yep.
speak. That'll at least get the process started.
Yep.
I got one for my mother lodge a week or so ago. And called the guy, had a great conversation, and sure enough, he's like, "Yeah, you're like the third lodge that I've spoken to, and you've gotten back to me." And he was doing his homework. He was doing exactly what we were preaching. And I'm like, "Hey, you're doing a great thing.
Yeah.
Come on, if we're not doing anything formally till September, but I'll keep your number. If we do something at the lodge that's open to the public, I'll give you a shout and stop on by."
Yep.
But there's like, God, yeah, this guy's doing his due diligence. He's going through all the steps. This guy's going to be a good brother.
Yeah, so he's serious about it.
Yeah, whichever lodge he goes to, he's going to be a great brother. And, welcome to Connecticut Freemasonry wherever you end up.
Yep. And a lot of times if you fill out one of those EMR requests, depending on what, happens on the back end, I don't think it works this way in Connecticut, but you'll be put on a mailing list. You won't get spam, but there's a high probability that you'll get messages about upcoming events.
Yeah.
Right? So that's important because you want to meet these people. You want to know what they're about. You want to know if Freemasonry is right for you. That's the information that you want. You want to know when those events are happening.
And you can see how active the lodge is and what type of events they get involved in. If you're somebody that wants to be heavily involved in community type events, whether it be, I don't know, cleaning up cemeteries, we've done that.
Yep.
Whether it's, giving bikes away. That is, they do in Morningstar here. They do a
the
bike
car
raffle,
show.
the car show.
Yep.
Based on the events that they're doing, that might give you a good idea of what that lodge is into and if it matches up with what your interests are.
Yep.
So.
Or you can see if there's programs on meeting nights. You may not have, you don't have the opportunity to view them necessarily until you become a Mason. But hey, if they're doing a lot of historical talks or they're doing a lot of, philosophy and esoteric talks,
Yeah.
that tells you kind of what the general vibe of that lodge is and whether it's a good fit for you or not.
And you'll usually be able to find out, because this came up in the conversation with the gentleman that I just was referencing before.
Mm-hmm.
He asked right away, what nights of the week do you meet on? Because he travels certain nights of the week, and he was kind of trying to figure out if he could work that into his schedule, and that would be a big factor in what lodge he chooses, because he wants to be there, he wants to be active. But if he's traveling every Tuesday and the lodge meets on Tuesdays, that's not gonna.
If you can never go, then what's the point?
Right, and that was one of the big things that brought a lot of new members to Morningstar, is when they added a Saturday meeting, because we have a lot of brothers here that work for have a government contractor, and they work second and third shift, and they can't make a 7:30 meeting on a Thursday night. So having that Saturday meeting got a lot of new brothers into this lodge, and they're very active.
Yep.
So you've got to figure that out. You got to make sure it fits into your schedule.
Yep. Good point.
So anything else on this topic, Ken? Or
I
you
don't think so.
we're?
I'm not. I think we kind of beat it to death, and I don't see any new comments coming in. So
I'm going to say let's charge and align the cannons one last time for one last quick toast before we go off the air.
The second toast of obligation for the evening.
And you can make it a short one. You'll understand why in a moment.
Okay. I think I already know. We really have to like sand down the corner of this table, because putting my arms on it, it's
a little rough on your sensitive skin.
Yeah, see, it's like digging into my skin. Whatever, we can rectify that.
All right, so this toast of obligation, I'm going to give a shout out to Right Worshipful Brother George Mudry, who celebrates his birthday tomorrow. The godfather of the podcast, so to speak.
Yes.
And got us both involved in it. So just a little happy birthday, George. As much as we bust on you, and we will continue to, wouldn't be the same without you, and it never is. So
we love you, brother. Happy birthday.
Ken, why don't you lead this one?
I can do that. Brother, right hand to arms.
To arms.
Ready.
Ready.
Aim.
Aim.
Fire good fire, fire all. Together, brother. Vivat, vivat, vivat.
And that'll wrap us up for the evening.
Yes, sir.
For the Freemasons podcast, signing off, I'm Worshipful Brother Joe.
I'm Worshipful Brother Ken, signing off.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, my